I love this, so I would really like to have it.
Beautiful.
What?
And even saleable.
Cha-ching.
From trash to cash. What a sweet deal. Taking upcycling to a whole new level. Money for nothing. Wednesday nights at 8:30 on View TV 6.
新导师，
我的战术是逼急集中。
2017新歌声，我来了。新火花，
今年的赛制特恐怖。
你们天王天后 PK， 这可是今年热门话题啊。
The all-new season of Sing China. Live every Friday night at 9:10. Tune into Channel 96, View TV 6, or watch via View.tv and View TV app. Rerun every Saturday at 12 midnight on Channel 99 View TV.
Good evening, I'm Diane To in Hong Kong and welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Chief Executive brushes off public's concern over the co-location arrangement for Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link. Mainland medics turned down cancer-stricken Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo request to have treatment overseas, saying he's too ill to travel. Foreign experts disagree. Donald Trump hails G20 summit a wonderful success. That's despite alienating the U.S. from the rest of the world on climate change and trade. Good evening. Chief Executive Carrie Lam says the benefits of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link will be hugely undermined if there's no co-location arrangement at the West Kowloon terminus. The arrangement has drawn scrutiny for allowing mainland authorities to enforce mainland laws and regulations in the city. Critics say it will threaten Hong Kong's autonomy. After inspecting an express train at Shek Kong, Lam stressed that the arrangement will comply with the Basic Law and details will be revealed soon.
The co-location arrangement is for the convenience of passengers. So our legislation over the matter will be centered at facilitating passengers. They can complete the checkups at the station before entering China.
To the latest on terminally ill Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo, sources say Liu told foreign doctors he wants to have liver cancer treatment in Germany or America. But mainland experts have turned down the request, saying he's too sick to travel abroad. The hospital says it's asked German and American specialists if there are better treatments for Liu after declining his request. They've reportedly fully endorsed the treatment Liu's receiving. But in a joint statement, the foreign medical experts said they believe Liu can be safely moved overseas with appropriate medical evacuation. They said it must happen as soon as possible. Less than 2 weeks after President Xi Jinping said Hong Kongers need to learn more about the country's history and culture, a top pro-Beijing figure has suggested bringing back mandatory Chinese history lessons rather than implementing controversial national education. Speaking to local media, Standing Committee member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, Henry Tang, said people's lack of knowledge of the country is due to the removal of mandatory Chinese history lessons at school. Tang said students should be taught about everything related to the country's history, including the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown.
All historical events should be taught in a thorough and unbiased manner. Teachers should list out all the facts to the students because Hong Kongers are able to analyze the details critically and independently.
While a consensus on climate change never looked likely at the G20 summit in Hamburg, which has now concluded, U.S. President Donald Trump nevertheless hailed it as a wonderful success. That's after world leader acknowledged the U.S. decision to withdraw from the Paris climate deal. Patrick Falk reports.
Police spray water cannons to disperse the remaining protesters in Hamburg early on Sunday. Saturday's march had been largely peaceful following 2 days of clashes. But matters took a turn here as some hurled bottles and other objects. The summit itself ended on a volatile note. The closing statement exposed the divide between the US and other G20 members over the Paris climate deal.
I think it's very clear that unfortunately we could not reach consensus. But the differences were not papered over, they were clearly stated.
Merkel did say, though, she was pleased other leaders all agreed the accord was irreversible. Climate change wasn't the only issue that saw Donald Trump at odds with G20 club members. The US president dug his heels in on trade, too. The joint communiqué acknowledged for the first time the right for countries to protect their markets with legitimate trade defense instruments, wording that appeared to counter a consensus to fight protectionism. It was a topic of discussion between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping during their meeting.
Trade is, as you know, a very, very big issue for the United States now, because over the years, and it's really been over a long period of time, many things have happened that have led to trade imbalances, and we're going to turn that around. And I know that with China in particular, which is a great trading partner, we will be able to do something that will be equitable and reciprocal.
Not for the first time, Trump's stance on several issues highlighted a void in global leadership. It's unsettled traditional allies in Europe and opened the door for China in particular to assume a bigger role on the world stage. Patrick Falk, ViewTV News.
Well, the president's daughter stirred up a storm after sitting in briefly for her father at a G20 meeting on African development between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Britain's Theresa May. Earlier in the day, Ivanka Trump, who's an advisor to the president, launched a World Bank project at the summit aimed at helping women entrepreneurs in developing economies. After eyebrows were raised over her sitting in for the president, German Chancellor Angela Merkel dismissed the kerfuffle, saying delegations can decide who sits at the table if the president isn't there, pointing out that Ivanka belongs to the US delegation. But that didn't stop the Twitterverse from exploding. Let's take a look here from Anita Gupta. Ivanka won't qualify for White House intern, and she is de facto POTUS. Very disturbing. While plenty of tweets on nepotism, with American comedian Ike Barinholtz remarking this is a totally normal thing that regular countries do, like Saudi Arabia or Westeros. Meanwhile, George Takei of Star Trek fame asked why Ivanka didn't take the chance to sign the US back onto the Paris Climate Accords that her father recently pulled out from. While staying on the topic, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she would hold four-way phone talks soon with the leaders of Russia, Ukraine and France to discuss a peace deal in eastern Ukraine. This after Merkel spoke with France's Emmanuel Macron and Russia's Vladimir Putin on the importance of implementing a ceasefire there ahead of yesterday's G20 summit meetings. Merkel said there was no glossing over the fact that there had been very, very slow progress in implementing the Minsk peace accords aimed at ending years of violence in eastern Ukraine with, quote, stagnation in some cases, relapses in others. To Canada next, where hundreds of residents forced to leave their homes as more than 180 wildfires scorched the lush ecology of British Columbia. The fires covered a large interior portion of the province, extending from Williams Lake in the north to Princeton in the south. Around 7,000 people were forced to evacuate. Dogs and other pets were taken away to a shelter where they were fed and groomed after the wildfires. There were no deaths or injuries reported, but some evacuees who worked on farms were forced to leave their livestock behind. All right, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Well, let's start with a look at some of the economic indicators investors in Asia will be keeping an eye on in the week ahead. On Monday, China releases producer price inflation data for the month of June. May inflation figures eased for a third straight month on tumbling prices of raw materials that signaled a cooling in economy activity. On Tuesday, the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers rolls out June vehicle sales numbers, coming off of 2 consecutive months of decline. The Bank of Korea's Monetary Policy Committee convened Thursday to make a decision on the direction of interest rates in Asia's fourth largest economy. And on Friday, Thailand's central bank holds a briefing on its quarterly monetary policy report. Last week, it raised its 2017 GDP growth forecast to 3.5% from 3.4%. Canada and the European Union will provisionally apply for a free trade pact on September 21st. The decision comes following a meeting between European Commission head Jean-Claude Juncker and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the sidelines of the G20 summit. It paves the way for 90% of the treaty to come into effect. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement is seen by both sides as a landmark deal for open markets against a protectionist tide. Last-minute disagreement over cheese tariffs and pharmaceutical patents prevented the deal from going ahead earlier. It will now come into force once all 28 EU member states and parliaments ratify it. Meantime, Donald Trump says he hopes the United States can quickly seal a bilateral trade deal with the UK. That's after meeting with British Prime Minister Theresa May in Hamburg. He told reporters the two had been working on a, quote, very powerful deal and that it would be great for both countries. But Britain can't seal any deal with the US until it leaves the EU in 2019. The UN estimates as much as 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted before it's eaten. It's what prompted one restaurant in New York to make avoiding waste part of its food concept. Fred Karayama reports.
Diners here are drinking to this, sustainability. This 12-seat restaurant in Brooklyn, New York epitomizes economy. Hardly anything goes to waste at Michelin-listed Okonomi. Chef and owner Yuji Haraguchi worships mottai nai. That's the Japanese concept of avoiding waste. He procures locally caught fish from his own fish shop. His chefs use the meat for Okonomi's Japanese-style breakfast and lunch. They simmer the head and bones for ramen stock that they'll serve at dinner. Less than 1/10 of the food Haraguchi cooks up heads for the garbage can.
After working in a fish industry for so many years, just realized that there are so much parts of fish that are not being utilized, which is the head and bones mostly.
The Environmental Protection Agency says more food fills incinerators than any other material. Food makes up 1/5 of the waste stream. Haraguchi is doing his part and thinks others can learn from his example. He says restaurants can cut waste by offering more flexible menus like his that feature ingredients available that day.
So whatever comes in, we try to serve it. And then the extra side dishes, if we have some extra parts, we try to run it so that what we receive are 100% used. Yes. So the menu flexibility, I think, will be the key. Yes.
The restaurant turns into a noodle shop at night called Yuji Ramen. Diners like Bridget Hamady, a regular, and Dimitri Tubelet say they're attracted by Haraguchi's credo as well as his cuisine.
The food is obviously amazing and fresh and impeccable. But also the philosophy that they use all of the food in terms of, during the brunch, they prepare excellent fish and then they use the same fish bones to make the ramen for the evening meals. And also it just kind of feels like a community here.
It's not that we necessarily seek these places out, but it's certainly a nice touch, and it doesn't, and I think it actually defines like the